I want to kick it off with a policy question. You made headlines on Friday when you said that you supported the decriminalization of sex work in New York City. And kind of along the similar vein of decriminalization, I'm curious, is the decriminalization of psychedelic mushrooms something you would pursue as mayor of New York City?
That is a great question, Matt. I haven't been asked that question yet. Marijuana, I believe, has already been decriminalized in New York City, which I would very much continue and embrace. I was always for partial decriminalization of sex work, which was for the sellers, typically the women. But it was brought to me that actually does not solve the problem fully, because you still end up with the same dangerous situations and the same preying on and vulnerability of a lot of these women if the buyers are still criminals. And so I was brought around to the fact that full decriminalization would be better, particularly if you could focus the resources on trafficking and underage, the victimization of underage women in particular. So decriminalization of psilocybin mushrooms, at a national level, I was for it. And in part because I spoke to military veterans who found that the only thing that helped them in their PTSD was psilocybin mushrooms. And you hear that, and then you look at some more data, and then you're like, wait a minute, like, why are we criminalizing this? Like, this stuff could literally be saving lives. And so I'd be very open to decriminalizing psilocybin mushrooms in New York City too, like if the same benefits were found here, which I'm pretty confident they would be.
Andrew, I want to ask you, one of the things that makes New York City really unique is the fact that it has one of the highest populations of Jews of any city in the world. But unfortunately, in recent years, anti-Semitism and other hate crimes have been on the rise. And I'm curious what your plan is to combat anti-Semitism and combat those hate crimes so that people are able to feel safe living in their own communities.
Anti-Semitism is very real. It's very dangerous. The city of New York has to stand against anti-Semitism at every level. And so to the extent that the city government can send that message, in some cases, it may mean responding to real threats against synagogues and communities, because these threats are happening. One thing I'm going to suggest would be very helpful, and this applies to a slightly different group, but I think it speaks to some of the same issues. The NYPD has to rigorously try to screen out extremists and folks who have hateful ideologies, because in a department of tens of thousands, there are going to be some folks who have those ideas, similar to what's happening, frankly, that we see at the national level with the U.S. Capitol Police or the military. There's there are a number of recent pieces about it. So we have to be constantly vigilant because anti-Semitism is so virulent. I had a friend that I worked with for years, and he's Jewish. And at one point we started talking about our families, and I asked him about his family's background. And he had entire generations die in the Holocaust. And, he told me about essentially entire half of the family tree just gone. And I heard him talking about this, and I was like, I cannot imagine what that feels like, and how that would forever change you, just knowing that half of your family tree had been killed in a genocide. So that they have a different historical perspective that I believe more of us need to take more seriously, frankly. It's I feel like the Jewish population has seen what hatred can do to an entire people on a global scale. And the United States for a long time has not taken hate seriously enough.
I wanted to ask a question about police and the NYPD. In major cities across the country this summer, including, of course, New York City, we saw mass protests against police brutality after the killing of George Floyd. And on your campaign website and in some speeches, you've listed Eric Garner as another case of It's just someone being unsensibly killed at the hands of police. I'm curious if in New York City, tragically, while you were mayor, a citizen lost their lives unjustly at the hands of police. What is like kind of the first thing that you would do to figure out like what is the situation, like how you would respond to the community, but as well as like the police side of things? It just seems like a very difficult situation, and I'm curious how you would handle it.
Well, I think a lot of the frustration people feel, Matt, is that when a police officer does something that results in someone dying, and even if it's captured on film, that there is not a lot of accountability. And so then you have to look at, well, like, how does a police officer get held accountable? And a lot of it right now is that it goes through a police commissioner, and the police commissioner is often a part of the same general culture as the department that they're in charge of. And there are very, very stringent union rules in place that limit what can be done in some cases. But to me, you need a leadership change. I've now talked to maybe a couple dozen police officers just walking around New York City in the last 72 hours. In the Bronx, it was like a black male cop and a Latina woman cop. Like that, they're like to me, what you have to look at really is like leadership at the top. And so if you can have a civilian commissioner of the NYPD that can actually hold someone accountable if they do something like result in the death of Eric Garner, then I believe that the public outcry would be very, very different than if the people did not actually feel like someone was going to be held responsible. Because what happens right now is that when a police officer does something that results in someone's loss of life, there's like this giant bureaucracy that is that then is standing between that police officer and accountability. And so if you can actually cut through that bureaucracy because you have the right leadership in place, then I think you can change the dynamic really, really significantly. And I think that's what a lot of people in New York want to see.